Welcome back, everyone, to another reaction video. Well, I make no secret of my love not only for history, but for football. And by football, I mean what most of the world calls football, what we call soccer here in the United States. And it's called that in a few other places as well. But I thought it would be a fun thing to dive into today to kind of bring both worlds together and talk about the history of football in the world. So GeoHistory has a video about this from 2 years ago. It's got 1.5 million views. I'll put the link in the description so you can check out GeoHistory without my commentary. And he's using a map to tell the story of the history of football. While I'm at it, I want to let you know that if you haven't already seen, I've been uploading daily videos talking about what happened on that day in history. So today, May 24th, uploaded a video about some of the historic events that happened, as well as some of the famous people whose birthdays were on May 24th. Those are going up on Facebook, on the Vlogging Through History Facebook page. They're going up on my TikTok channel, and they're going up on Instagram. So the links are down in the description if you want to follow me on any or all of those different platforms. Let's go ahead and dive into this one. And by the way, in case you're wondering about the jersey I'm wearing right now, this is Caledonian Braves. I actually got to go see them play. They play right outside of Glasgow, Scotland. I got to see them play back in February. I'm actually one of thousands of part owners and investors in the club. They play in the Scottish Lowland League, and they're working hard. They finished pretty high near the top this year, and the team that finished first actually got promoted to League Two this year. So I'm hoping that Braves, it'll be our turn to go to League Two next year.
We start around the 3rd century BC. In China, Cuju is played, one of the oldest known ball games. Two teams compete around a ball filled with feathers that must be sent into a net without using the hands.
Nice. So this actually makes a lot of sense, because any of the sports that we know and love today, before they became what they are today, they went through evolution, and they went through different forms. And what really has created sports like football today for the world is taking these different sports that have been played and kind of bringing a agreed upon rule set to it. Baseball's the same way. Baseball wasn't invented by Abner Doubleday, but what happened was, in the middle of the 19th century, they took these sports that were being played by people, including a form of baseball, and brought rules to it and brought formality to it.
In ancient Greece, episkiros, another ball sport, is played between two teams of 12 to 14 players. The goal of this game is to send the ball over the opponent's line using hands and feet. The Romans based their game harpastum on this sport. In harpastum, two teams each try to keep the ball in their own camp as long as possible, again using hands and feet. Elsewhere in the world, many ball games are played with local rules. Around the 12th century, in northwestern France and the British Isles, a ball game is played that's called soule in French and mob football in English.
Mob
the
football.
rules vary slightly from one region to another.
Mob football, that's basically what happens when you put a bunch of 5-year-olds on the pitch. My kids all started around the age of 5 or 6, and basically, like, you just have two sides that everybody runs to the ball. Instead of trying to get open, trying to make passes, they all just run to the ball. It's mob football.
Globally, a match pits two villages, two parishes, or simply two teams against each other, which can be composed of several tens of players. The goal is to drop the ball into the camp of the opposing team. This can be in front of the local church door, in front of a
That's
wall,
awesome.
or even sometimes in a pond. The ball can be played with both the feet and hands. Most often, it ends in violent free-for-alls. In 1579...
Oh, so it's kind of like sports today.
Chesterton, a match between Cambridge University students and villagers got out of hand. As a result, Cambridge students thereafter only played on their own university field.
Here comes the modern game.
At the beginning of the 19th century in British colleges and universities, team sports are seen as a good way to train young people in discipline, team spirit, and leadership. At the same time, the Industrial Revolution and the advent of the railroad facilitate exchanges. The idea of organizing inter-university matches appears, but
It's interesting to see how other inventions help cause the growth of and the standardization of the game. So you don't think much about football being connected to something like the railroad, but when the railroad allows for travel happening a lot faster, now you're allowing for more regular opposition visits, and being able to travel from one place to another a little quicker. And then, of course, you're going to get mass communication with things like the telegraph, which is going to allow the spread of information faster. And then you're going to have the cable under the ocean in the 1860s.
Each team plays with its own rules, and the first meetings are confused, especially between teams that mainly favor dribbling, that is, playing with the feet, and those that mainly favor handling, that is, playing with the hands.
So you're going to develop different sports depending on who wants what. I know that's where this is going. Obviously, rugby is going to be invented in rugby.
For a successful match, it therefore becomes necessary to either negotiate the rules beforehand or to divide the match into 2 halftimes and to play with the rules of each team for one half. In Cambridge, students from different universities meet regularly to try to establish common rules. In 1857, the Sheffield Football Club is founded as the first independent club in history that is not linked to a university or institution. The club plays under its own rules.
And a lot of these early clubs are going to form around workplaces. They're going to form around common bonds that people have that already have existed outside of the sport.
Which are similar to modern football. In 1863, new and more detailed Cambridge rules are published, but just a few days later, the newly formed Football Association, which represents 11 London clubs and is the first federation in history, publishes its own rules inspired by the Cambridge rule.
And that's what it's still called today, is the laws of the game.
The clubs that favor handling, seeing the rules evolve towards dribbling, come together in 1871 to found the Rugby Football Union. This marks the break between rugby football and the Football Association, which is today more commonly known as simply football or soccer.
And association football is like that word association is where they get the nickname for it, soccer. People who play association football are soccers.
The same year, the Football Association organizes the first FA Cup. The matches last 90 minutes and feature 2 teams of 11 players, including, for the first time, a goalkeeper.
There you go.
In 1872, the first international match between England and Scotland takes place and ends in a draw, 0-0.
I love that England and Scotland played the first international match. That's so appropriate.
At that time, the United Kingdom is the leading economic and colonial power in the world. British nationals are sent all around the world to serve the empire.
And here's another example of how history and sports intersect. The fact that the sun never sets in the British Empire directly leads to them exporting things like cricket and soccer.
Railway workers in Latin America, students in Switzerland, or simply British communities found clubs around the world to play Football Association, rugby football, or sometimes a combination of both. In 1881, the first international women's game takes place between England and Scotland.
I love that it's that early. If you would have asked me, when do you think the first international women's game took place, I would have said like the 1940s or something. That's great.
The fact that women are playing football is frowned upon, and during the return match, a crowd attacks the players, forcing them to flee in their omnibus. Around the world, the sport becomes increasingly popular, and many new clubs and federations are created. In 1902, the first international matches outside the United Kingdom are held. Argentina.
So then you're getting international matches outside the UK. So now what are you going to need? You have the FA that handles things in the UK, but now you're going to need FIFA, which I think comes in 1904.
Beats Uruguay 6-0 in one match, and in the other, the Austrian team wins 5-0 against the Hungarian team.
Austria and Hungary. Nice. Here you go. FIFA.
In 1904, the Fédération Internationale de Football Association, or FIFA, is founded in Paris. At first, it brings...
All right, kudos. I know that this is a map channel, so they're going to do this stuff well, but kudos for getting the French map right. Alsace and Lorraine, still part of Germany at this point.
Together 7 countries, with its role being to organize international matches. More nations quickly joined FIFA. However, France is opposed to England's application because it wants each country to be represented by a single federation. The United Kingdom has the 4 oldest federations in history.
So there's why, to this day, you don't have the UK competing as one team, but rather you have Northern Ireland, Ireland. I mean, this time there's no Northern Ireland, but today you have Northern Ireland, Ireland, Scotland, Wales, and England all competing separately because they have separate associations.
And they don't want to merge. Finally, after a vote, England is admitted separately. In 1908, at the London Olympic Games, football is officially admitted for the first time.
Early.
Professionalism being then forbidden at the Olympic Games, it's the England national amateur football team which represents the country and which wins the gold medal. In 1910, FIFA exceptionally accepts the application of Scotland, Wales, and Ireland. The 4 British federations could therefore play international matches, but at the Olympic Games, only the England amateur team could represent the country. In 1912, at the Olympic Games in Stockholm, it wins again.
Stockholm, 1912, is where you have, among other people, George Patton representing the Army. In the, I think it was called the pentathlon or something, and sword fighting and shooting and running. It was pretty intense.
In 1916, during World War I, Argentina celebrates its 100 years of independence by organizing a football tournament with Brazil, Chile, and Uruguay. On this occasion, CONMEBOL, the first continental confederation, is founded.
That's interesting that it came before UEFA did.
1920, during the Antwerp Olympic Games, in which Egypt is the first non-European country to participate, Belgium wins. And in 1924 in Paris, Uruguay wins the gold medal in its first.
And Uruguay, I think, is going to be one of the first teams to win the World Cup when it comes about.
Football becomes so popular that many leagues become professional, and as a result, more and more players could no longer represent their country at the Olympic Games, which remains reserved for amateurs. FIFA then thinks of creating its own international competition, which would consist of professional teams. In 1928, during the Olympic Games in Amsterdam, FIFA announces its project to create its own World Cup.
And this is the biggest sporting event in the world. Do not let anyone tell you that it's the Super Bowl, because it's not. Maybe it gets, maybe the Super Bowl in the United States gets a greater viewing for one day out of the year, but this is the most popular sporting event in the world for sure.
Uruguay, after its new victory at the Olympic Games, is chosen to host the first World Cup, which would take place in 1930 on the occasion of the centenary of the country's independence. Uruguay undertakes to build a new stadium for the occasion, but in Europe, the players and federations have little interest in this event, especially since it takes about 2 weeks by ship to reach Uruguay, and therefore the entire trip will take 2 months. After many negotiations, only 4 European countries agree to participate. The World Cup final is played between Uruguay and Argentina, whose rivalry is so strong that a referee can be found only a few hours before the match.
Everybody's like, nope, I am not doing it. No chance. And that just goes to show you how intense people can be when it comes to their sports, especially with world football. Because, I mean, I remember vividly the game between the United States and Colombia, where there was an own goal scored by the Colombian player, and he ended up dead a few days later. It was crazy.
Who agrees to adjudicate the match only if he is protected. Both teams come with their own ball. One half is played with the Argentine ball and the other with the Uruguayan. Uruguay wins 4-2.
There it is.
4 years later, it's the turn of Mussolini's fascist Italy to host the World Cup, which is the first to be broadcast live on the radio. Uruguay chooses not to participate in response to the lack of interest shown by European countries for its cup.
You didn't come to ours, we're not coming to yours.
In the final, Italy wins against Czechoslovakia.
Isn't that interesting that the very first World Cups were won by the home teams?
2-1.
And Czechoslovakia was second place, and that was a country that only had existed at that point for, what, 15 years?
In 1936, FIFA chooses to play the next World Cup in France, which provokes the anger of Latin American countries who want the cup to be played alternately between the two continents. Uruguay and Argentina decide then not to participate. Spain, which is in the middle of a civil war, does not participate either. And a few months before the cup, Austria, which had qualified, is annexed by Nazi Germany. In the final, Italy retains its title by beating Hungary 4-2. World War II then brings the competition to a halt for the next 12 years.
12
The World
years.
Cup resumes in 1950 in Brazil. Germany and Japan.
Just goes to show you, I mean, we know the human cost of the war, and we know the devastation it brought, but just look at how long it took to get those things back up to speed, things like the World Cup. We go 12 years without one. And, you know, there are other things, too. I mean, just things like rationing of supplies and food and things like that don't immediately go away as soon as the war ends.
Which are occupied are not allowed to participate. In addition, at the beginning of the Cold War, the countries of the Eastern Bloc do not participate either. Only 13 countries play in the finals, including England, which was previously in conflict with FIFA and participates for the first time. But to everyone's surprise, England is eliminated in the group stage after losing to the United States and Spain. This is the only World Cup that does not end with a final, but with a finalist group. By chance, the two favorites, Uruguay and Brazil, face each other in the last match, which is played in the brand new Maracana Stadium with a record capacity of 200,000 spectators. A draw would be enough for Brazil to be champion. However, Uruguay wins 2-1 in front of a stunned Brazilian audience. 4 years later, Switzerland hosts the competition, which is the first to be broadcast on television. Hungary, which is undefeated for 31 games, is the favorite.
Geez, Hungary was like a world power in soccer at this time for quite a while. I mean, they've been showing up a lot early on here.
To everyone's surprise, West Germany narrowly wins the final, thanks to a goal scored in the final minutes of the game.
Oh, here we go with CONCACAF.
In 1954, the Asian Football Confederation and the Union of European Football Associations, or UEFA, are founded. The following year...
I'm really surprised that UEFA wasn't founded until 1954. I would have figured that would have been soon after FIFA.
European Champion Clubs Cup is organized, the predecessor of the prestigious Champions League. Finally, in 1957, in the context
And if you're not familiar with the sport of football, there's obviously a lot of layers to it, but for the Champions League, if you hear about that, for example, all of the teams in UEFA, in the European world of football, have the chance, at least the top teams have a chance of going to the Champions League. So, for example, say you finish in the top 4 in the Premier League in the UK. Then you qualify for the Champions League. And there are other ways, too, and there are other times where it could be more or less, depending on the country and the league. You know, if you're in France, if you're in Spain, if you're in Germany, a lot of the top leagues get more teams into it. And then you have the Europa League, which is below that. And if you win the Europa League, like Tottenham Hotspur just did, now that qualifies them to be in the Champions League next year, despite being in like 16th place in the Premier League. So there's a lot of ways to get into it, but it's really, really good stuff.
Decolonization. The Confederation of African Football is founded by Egypt, Ethiopia, Sudan, and South Africa. But the latter is disqualified from the first African Cup because the country practices apartheid and do not have a multiracial team.
And this will go on for a couple of decades after this, where there'll be a lot of pressure on South Africa put on them by boycotting them from events like this, but also from trade and things like that, from the Olympics even, to try and put pressure on them to end their segregation practices.
In 1958, Sweden hosts the World Cup. It's the only time in which the 4 British federations participate, and it's the first participation of the USSR. The Brazilian team dominates thanks to its new 17-year-old star, Edson Arantes do Nascimento, better known as Pele, and who will come to be known as one of the greatest footballers in history.
And I'll never forget the day that Pele died, because it's the same day that the man who raised me, my grandfather, died, December 29th, 2022.
In the final, he scores 2 goals against Sweden, giving Brazil its first title. In 1961, the Confederation of North, Central America, and Caribbean Association Football is founded. The following year, during
now
the
you know,
World
if you didn't know before, what CONCACAF stands for.
Cup in Chile, Brazil retains its title by beating Czechoslovakia 3-1. In 1963, to celebrate the 100th anniversary of the Football Association, a match is organized at Wembley Stadium between England and a FIFA World Selection. England wins 2-1. 3 years later, England hosts the World Cup. The competition is marked by the first participation of North Korea, which is not recognized by the United Kingdom, this being the case since the Korean War. England wins the final against West Germany. The same year, the Oceania Football Confederation is founded. In 1969, in Central America, while the rivalry is strong between El Salvador and Honduras, the 2 countries have to play 3 qualifying matches for the...
And I'll put a link up at the end on the end screen to my video taking a look at Oversimplified's video on the football war.
Next World Cup. At the end of the games, under high tension and after some scuffles, a short war of 100 hours breaks out between the 2 countries.
People take it seriously, man.
3,000 casualties. The following year, in 1970, Mexico organizes the World Cup, which is the first to be broadcast in color on television. For better visibility on screen, Adidas creates the famous Telstar ball with its black and white design. This is also the first cup played with the yellow and red cards. In the final, Brazil wins against Italy.
And again, I recognize that not everybody watching this is a fan of the sport, so you might not know the rules, but yellow card is like a foul, but it's a foul with a serious warning attached, because if you get a second yellow card, you get a red card, and a red card means you're out of the game. Not only that, your team doesn't get to replace you and plays the rest of the game down a man. Now, in high school soccer here in Ohio, for example, if you get a yellow card, you actually have to come off the field briefly, and so, but you can sub in and out in high school football. So,
therefore, can keep the prestigious Jules Rimet Cup, which was intended to end up in the first country to win 3 World Cups. FIFA then creates a new trophy that can only stay for a short time with future champions. In 1974, in the middle of the Cold War, West Germany hosts the World Cup, including in West Berlin, with the Berlin Wall, of course, still dividing the city. On this occasion, the only match in history between West and East Germany takes place. In the final, West Germany wins against the Netherlands. In 1976, just as Argentina is preparing to host the next World Cup, a coup d'etat takes place and a military dictatorship seizes
oops, we're hosting the World Cup. Oh, we just had a coup, sorry.
power. Despite the controversy, the country still organizes and hosts the World Cup, but the event is marked by a series of suspicions of cheating in favor of Argentina, which is allowed to play its matches in staggered order, thus having the advantage of knowing the scores of the other matches. Argentina wins the final against the Netherlands.
Here comes money.
Football becomes more and more popular in the world, generating more and more money through ticket sales, TV rights, merchandising, and advertising.
And this cannot help but change how the game is played and viewed and operated by the different clubs that are going to become more than clubs. They're going to become, businesses.
Clubs are getting richer and attracting more and bigger investors.
Here comes the Premier League.
The value of players is rising. In 1982, FC Barcelona buys the new Argentine star Diego Maradona for a record amount of roughly 7 million euros.
That's
That
huge.
same year, post-Franco Spain hosts the World Cup, which is the first to be played by 24 teams and which is seen by 1 billion viewers worldwide.
And now, in the next World Cup, which is going to be hosted here in North America, going to be 48 teams.
The event is marred by the match between West Germany and Austria, which is called the Disgrace of Gijón.
Oh, yeah.
After a German goal, the two teams who are sure to be qualified slow down their game, eliminating Algeria. On the other hand, France and West Germany face each other in a match full of twists, and it's the first of the competition to end in a penalty shootout. In the final, Italy wins against West Germany. In 1986, Mexico hosts the World Cup again, replacing Colombia, which had withdrawn. Diego Maradona is at the top of his game. During a match between Argentina and England, he scores a goal with his hand that's
The hand of God,
nonetheless, and becomes known as the Hand of God. 4 minutes later, he scores.
It's amazing how some of these things have become so iconic that people just instantly know what you're talking about. These moments. That's what sports can do. They've become right up there with some of the great historical events that we remember.
One of the most beautiful goals in history, which comes to be known as the goal of the century. In the final, Argentina wins against West Germany.
Look at how many times West Germany is either the winner or the runner-up in these World Cups, man. They were so good.
4 years later, during the World Cup in Italy, West Germany takes its revenge by beating Argentina in the final.
Dominant, man.
In 1991, the first Women's World Cup is held in China and is won by the U.S. team. 3 years later, the United States organizes the World Cup. A reunified Germany participates for the first time, as well as Russia after the fall of the USSR. The final between Brazil and Italy is the first final to end in a penalty shootout. Brazil wins 3-2. In 1998, France organizes the first World Cup played with 32 teams. In the final, France wins against Brazil 3-0 with 2 goals from Zinedine Zidane. In 2001, Zidane is bought by Real Madrid for the record sum of 75 million euros. The following year, in 2002, Japan and South Korea co-host the World Cup. To everyone's surprise, Turkey and South Korea reached the semifinals. But above all, the final is greatly anticipated as it hits Brazil versus Germany, who still had not met during a World Cup.
Really?
Whereas
Yeah.
since 1950...
Well, they're going to meet later on, and there's going to be a destruction that happens. I think Germany wins like 7-0 or something.
And excepting 1978, all the finals were played by one of the two teams. Brazil wins 2-0 thanks to a double by Ronaldo. It's the 5th title for Brazil, which
Not Cristiano Ronaldo.
consolidates its status as best team in the world. In 2006, Germany hosts the World Cup. During the final between France and Italy, Zidane, who plays the last game of his career, is excluded after having given a headbutt to an opponent. Italy wins in a penalty shootout. In 2010, South Africa is the first African country to host the World Cup. The event is followed by 3.2 billion viewers. The final is between the Netherlands and Spain, who have never won a World Cup. Spain wins its first title, while the Netherlands loses its 3rd final.
Interesting that they didn't talk about the founding of the Premier League. That's kind of especially when you're talking about the money. There had always been a top division in the UK, or in England, but the Premier League kind of changes the game as far as the money and the way things are done.
At the end of 2010, FIFA awards the 2018 and 2022 World Cups to Russia and Qatar. These choices are controversial because there are serious suspicions of corruption, and the two countries are accused of not respecting human rights. Qatar is now investing heavily in football, notably by buying PSG for 70 million euros. The objective is to transform the club, which is in the middle of a crisis, into a major European club capable of winning a Champions League. In 2013, Brazil, which is preparing to host the next World Cup, is challenged by huge demonstrations protesting the excessive expenses made for the organization. The following year, during the World Cup, Germany and Brazil meet for the second time. This time, Germany wins big, 7-1, which is experienced as a humiliation by a large part of the Brazilian population. In the final, Germany beats Argentina and becomes the first European country to win in Latin America. In 2017, PSG makes the most expensive transfer in history by buying Neymar for 220 million euros.
And then they're going to end up adding, they'll have Kylian Mbappe and Lionel Messi on that same team.
Year, the club follows up with the purchase of Kylian Mbappe for 180 million euros. The same year, the World Cup is played in Russia. The event is followed by half the world population. In the final, France wins its second title against Croatia.
That was a great World Cup. I remember that one well. That's really the first World Cup where I was like intensely following it. And you know, Croatia, this little team going up against these juggernauts in France.
From this point on, all eyes turn to Qatar, which is preparing for the 2022 World Cup. The small country of 3 million inhabitants must be able to welcome more than 1 million supporters and must therefore build a lot of infrastructure.
Think about that. You're hosting an event where tourists to the equivalent of 25% of your nation's population are going to be descending on your event.
Including hotels, a metro, and stadiums. 2 million migrant workers are working on this project, but many NGOs denounce the Qatari system that allows employers to confiscate the passports of their workers to prevent them from leaving, even though they have no rights or even a minimum wage. Under pressure, Qatar is changing its laws to improve working conditions. But over a 10-year period, more than 6,500 workers have already died on World Cup construction sites. From an ecological point of view, the choice to air condition the stadiums, which are under the open sky, is also highly criticized. After Qatar, the next World Cup to be played in 2026 will be held in Canada, the United States, and Mexico, and should be the first to include 48 teams. Today, football is the most popular sport in the world. It's played by approximately 275 million players, 13 million of whom are women, and generates approximately 400 billion euros in profits worldwide.
That's crazy. That was good. I enjoyed that. If you have other videos related to sports and history that you think that I should check out and maybe feature on the channel, let me know in the comment section below. And like I said, I'll put up a link here at the end on the screen so you can check out the one about the football war. And follow me on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, links down in the description. Thanks for watching.